So I believe what we're going to end up doing is this one, actually. So we haven't done anything like this before on the channel, and I think there's some confusion around how to go about making stuff like this. And I think this is a great place to practice it. We could have done all sorts of other ones. Maybe in another video sometime, we'll go through and make a whole bunch of different patterns, just practice different techniques. But I think for now, I think this is, it has some interesting things in it that I think gives us a cool opportunity to learn some new stuff. So we're going to start by working on this middle pattern. And I may actually, we don't really need the 3D view for this. So I'm actually going to shrink my reference down so that we can always see it as I'm working on it. So I think it's worth having this always on top, and people can see this as we're building it, because we only really need the 2D view. So I'm going to make a new graph, and we'll just call this pattern generator. The important thing is, not only do we need to be making the masks itself for like we can focus on just making the shape. That's relatively easy, but we also need to make ID masks to be able to have our different colors here, because it seems like the stripe here and this center star share the same color, and then these sort of triangles are different color, and then the longer strips are different colors. So we sort of have 3 colors there, and we need to be able to preserve that as masks so that in the other graph we can pick our colors freely. I wouldn't want to bake these colors, meaning that they're set in stone somewhere else. I want to have them all as black and white masks that I can then peel apart in the main graph. So making this pattern, this is actually deceptively simple. A lot of these things, a lot of geometric patterns seem really complicated, but they actually really aren't when you think about them individually, piece by piece. And sometimes a lot of the complexity of the pattern comes from just attaching very simple shapes to each other, and they sort of show up. So a good example would be like this center shape, which I think is what we should start with. Really, all this is, you can imagine these kind of like flechette bars here, and there's 4 of them, right? It's sort of like 2 plus signs that are rotated, and they blend through each other, right? So there's 1 bar here, a 2nd bar, a 3rd, and a 4th. And that makes the whole pattern. These shapes within it, they arrive basically because of the way these blend. Like where this shape interacts with this shape, we get this intersection. And where they all interact with each other, we get this red shape, right? So you can think about the green level here is where it's just that bar, that 1 vertical bar. The white here is where it overlaps with at least 1 other shape. Like where this bar and this bar overlap, we get this color. And then this is where more than 1 overlap, right? So it's actually better to think about it as kind of this whole piece, and we'll arrive at those different patterns as we build towards them. So the first thing I'm going to focus on is just making this 1 vertical bar. And that's really easy. We're just going to grab a shape. Square is fine. And I'm going to scale this appropriately. And then we need to create that point. And the way I'm going to do that is get a directional warp. And get a gradient. We're going to rotate this 90 degrees. And I'm going to use this, directionally warping it up. And we can increase the intensity to get however that slope should be. And I may need to shrink the shape down a bit so we get more. That's perfect. So the directional warp, right, is just warping stronger where there's white, weaker where there's black. So obviously the middle of the shape is going to get pushed up higher than the ones on the side. Now, we've obviously pushed the bottom up as well, so we need to fix that, and we'll use a mirror grayscale. And we can mirror this across the y-axis, the vertical axis, so that fixes that. And what we're going to do next is make a splatter circular. So this is just a tile. We're going to do a whole video. I think this is coming up sometime next month. I think this is in April 2025. We're going to do, this splatter circular deep dive is on the docket. But I know I need 4 of them. Or I need 8 of them, right, for the 8 points. I'm going to switch this to image input. And I'm just going to move these so that the radius is at the beginning. So the middle point of the shape is right in the exact middle of this texture. And I'll just scale these up a bunch because they're really small. You can probably go even bigger. And now we just need to shrink them horizontally. So we can go to the horizontal size and just shrink them until we get them roughly the way we want. So that's really simple, actually. And then the complicated part comes from, now, how do we get that effect I was talking about, like where they intersect each other, they combine? This is tricky. Like, you could think about it like make this shape completely separately, the white shape, and then make the red shape completely separately. I think it's much easier to do all in one go. So what we're going to do here is go down to our color. And what we can do is turn on luminance by pattern number. So this shades them brighter the further that pattern is, because it's spawning 8 of them. And if I lower them, you'll see we only have 3. We have 3 colors, right? With the last rendered image being the brightest, and the most recent one being rendered as the brightest. And then the last rendered one is darkest. You can actually just go up to 8 again. What we're going to do now is switch the way these are blending. This is odd, right? Because normally on like tile generators and stuff, the blending mode is set to add by default. I mean, we prefer it to be on max usually. Slider circular starts on max, but in this situation, we actually want add. We want these shapes to all add their values together. Now it's really, really white because these values were already all quite bright. So when we add these two together, we're going to white. And even this and this get really close to white. In fact, I think they do go to white, right? They do. But what's cool is we can lower, just up here in the color section, how bright these are to begin with. And then look at what happens when we add them. We actually just get our shape, right? Because where they intersect with each other and they add, we get that new result. And if I lower this even further, we get all of our shapes. Right? So it's actually really easy to do this. It's a bit of a trip, right? But it's actually fairly simple to make this complicated shape. So once we have that, we're going to make an auto level. Just make sure we have the full range. And now the question is, we need to be able to make all of these separate masks. And that should be fairly simple because these are all brighter than these, which are brighter than these in turn. So we should be able to actually make this pretty easy. We make a histogram scan and brighten it until we grab just the first bit. There's our red shape. Pretty easy. And if we grab the next ones, right, so we're going further up the histogram, we're grabbing that white triangle shape. And if we just subtract the little red shape from that, there's just our triangles. And then if we set the histogram scan to full, and we subtract this guy, we have our green shape. So there's all 3 shapes. Really simple. It's actually not that bad. So we're going to pack these all into textures. Right? So we're going to put these into the different channels of a color texture, just so that we're able to tile them around as one color texture in the main graph and then separate them out when we need them. So we'll let this one, this kind of red shape, be the red channel. This kind of white intermediate shape, we'll let be the green. And then this big shape will be the blue. All right, so there you go. It's actually really easy. There's not a lot to this. Now we might want to change the size of these. And the nice thing is, because we don't have, like I said, if we had made all 3 of these shapes separately, adjusting them would be a real nightmare. But because we can just go into this guy and go, you know what? I'm getting the vibe and the concept that the red shape is actually quite a bit bigger, which means these must be thicker, right? And these V's don't go as deep in the concept, perhaps. So for us, it's really easy now. We just go to the splatter circular and scale them up in X. Maybe it's a little too much. And they all update because we're relying on the way that they blend against each other, not from a bunch of different shapes having to line up. So this feels better to me. And if we want to increase the peak there, maybe it's a little too shallow, that's great. We just go back to the directional warp, increase the strength. And everything just comes for the ride. Right? So it's a really nice way of just, it keeps it really simple, right? And what's cool is making the ones at the corners here, they're the exact same shape, just moved to the corners. So what we can actually do here, I can make a tile generator, not a color one. And I'm going to set this to 1 by 1 and put it in image input. I just like this because it's easier for me to scale stuff. So I'll scale this down a bit. You'll notice that when you're scaling down from the original size, we're getting some aliasing. We may need to fix that later. But for now, I think this is okay. Right, we still have everything working properly. Looks nice. We also are going to make a duplicate of this and put this pattern in the corner. Right, so we're going to offset it by 0.5, so it's horizontally offset, then offset it again vertically. And that takes care of the rest of that part of the pattern. Because that's all we're seeing in the corner here, is this same center pattern just moved over. So really all we have to do here is blend these together. You could add it or max or whatever. There we go. And all of this still just works. Really simple. And now we just have to make this shape in the middle, right? This kind of little interesting section that goes between them. There's a lot of ways you could do this too. I think an easy way to do it is to just get, it's the same sort of idea. You're going to use splatter circulars a lot here, just because they're really useful on patterns like this that are radially symmetrical, right? Like they have multiple axes of symmetry across different angles. So I'm going to get another splatter circular grayscale. And we're just going to get 2, because I'm going to make this big sort of capsule shape and just have 2 of them, each at a 90 degree to each other. So we'll set this to 2. And we're going to get a shape. And there actually already is a shape that's very similar to this called a capsule. Like this one. And we can, the pattern specific slider on this just does this essentially. We can get it kind of roughly in the size we want. Might need to scale it up a little or down a little. We just have to play with it. We'll have more time later to adjust that. And I plug this. Well, let's histogram scan this so it's totally straight. Or totally one value, rather. Like that. Put that in here. Go to image input. We're going to obviously want these a lot bigger. So we'll set the sizes to full. Again, radius to 0, so they're right in the middle. And then if you apply a, we want these to rotate by 90 degrees. We can turn, there's a couple things you can do here. If we rotate this 90 degrees, we need to have, we could do it with 4 too if we want. The other way you could do it is just have one pattern but have 2 rings. And then rotate the rings 90 degrees. Which, this might actually be trickier than doing it manually with that. That's fine. And then I'll rotate the whole ring 45 degrees. So we have that basic shape. Now, it isn't perfect. We can make some adjustments though. So let's scale this up. It almost touches the edges. Like the end of this is very close to the edge of the pattern. And I think like it's a bit more bulbous, really. Like this curves out. It's not a straight line. So it might be even easier than this. Let's try something a little different here. It might be better just to get 4 squares, or 4 circles rather. So set this to 4, and we can get just discs and scale these up a bunch. I think this is actually going to work better. And we're going to rotate the whole ring 45 degrees. And I think this actually will work much better. I'm just going to push the radius in a bit so that they start closer to the middle. And this actually, I think, looks a bit better. I wish they were a little wider. So we can just go to their size X and tune it down a bit. And I think that's actually better. Like that. Yeah, I think that's better. We can scale this up because, again, it needs to get really close to the edge. And then really, we're just going to edge detect this. It's going to create some roundness here. A way that you can avoid this is by getting a bevel and switching the corner type to angular. And then we can just histogram scan the whole shape. And then do another scan where we get sort of the internal shape. Right? So I'm grabbing all of the white with this version. May need to smooth that a bit later. I'm going to apply a bit of smoothing on the bevel. We might have some trouble with the angular there. There's a little dip here, which isn't great. But we'll play with that in a minute. And subtract one from the other. That creates a more a less round bevel. Right? We don't have this kind of soft side there. So that can work. Obviously, we're having a bit of a bump here. And that's just because this isn't perfectly smooth. So when we use the angular bevel, we're getting a little, it's hard to see in the bevel shape on its own. But if you use a normal, you can see it really easily. It kind of like pinches in there. We may be able to fix that by blurring this slightly. And then using a histogram scan to try to average it out. Right, so blurring it a bit, setting the histogram to 0.5 in full, just to pick the middle of the bevel. And we'll see if this helps a little. Not a ton. So that might not be a great way to do it. Shape stroke is also not a bad way to do this occasionally. Let's go here. What we can do is create a tile generator and make a version of this that's just a bit smaller. And subtract these from each other. So this can actually work. We just need to fiddle with this a bit. So I'm going to scale it down some more. And obviously it's not even, but we can make this one larger. We may have to do it in sections. Right? Because we can't really do it step by step. It's a little hard to make it perfect. Yeah, it'd be tricky to get that working like super well. Scaling that is hard because it's not really a scale per se. But the shape stroker is probably the best way to do this. This will get us a relatively sharp outline on either side. So I think that's probably the most effective we're going to get. And I'm going to scale this shape down a little bit. Like that. I think that's just about right. It's a little bit sharper on that side than this side, but that's nothing we can't fix by just blurring this a little. Just a tiny bit. And then again, histogram scanning it afterwards. And I think that's really good. And then there's these exit points. And that's really easy to do as well. Right, again, just trying to think about it simple shapes at a time. And we had to try a couple things, but we got there. This stuff's not too complicated. So let's get... I actually think that the patterns on the top are actually different. Because if we were to mirror this, we could actually just try it in the PRF right now. Watch if we duplicate this. There's more spokes on the ones in the corner than the ones here. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, it's got 12 instead of 8. So that's fine. We can just duplicate this. Right, we'd rather be as close to the reference there as we can. And just add more to this. To the one that's on the corner. And we may have to shrink them down a little. So we'll shrink them in X a bit. But these should work just the same. And I think they need to rotate a bit too. Because they should end, it looks like they end cutting a spoke in half. So we should just rotate this ring. We could do the math to find out exactly what it is. So we could go like, yeah, they should end basically, like, I think it's a 15-degree rotation. Yeah. There you go. So now it's actually it matches much closer now. And we're missing a bit of this pattern now. Just because this histogram scan isn't sensitive enough right now to pick up every value that's relevant there. This one is not, right? It needs to go a bit further still. There you go. Although it's having trouble grabbing not from one and not from the other. So that's fine. We'll just do these separately. Right, we'll do the histogram scans for this one independently. So let's grab just that first shape. Because they work a little bit differently than the other patterns. I think that's correct. Yep. And now we need to expand this a bit so it grabs the big triangles. Yep. And then the whole shape. Or that didn't grab all of the big ones. I see. This is actually all the small ones. And then this is all of the big triangles, although it's really close. Actually is grabbing it there. We may need to actually just lower the base value here to create more separation. So I'm going to go to the color and lower it a bit more even. And then this should be really easy to grab. Set the smallest shapes. It should include all of these, which it does. There, now we can grab all the other ones a bit easier. It's not grabbing the long ones. So there's the base. Here's all the big long triangles. We're having trouble having it not grab this guy up here. We need to grab all 3 of these, and it's missing one. But we're awfully close. might be impossible to isolate them completely. So we could grab that one. And then if we want to, just manually grab this. And let's look for just that big shape. That might be tricky to do as well. It's tricky because this and this are just very similar colors. So we can go to here again. Let's just try to separate these colors even more. There's also another trick we could do if this doesn't work as well. I'm going to go to our luminance. I'm going to add a little bit of luminance rand. Well, that won't help. I'll add a bit of, we'll make it darker even more. So just trying to create additional separation. It's also easier for me to see these before they move. It's really hard to grab those ones. So let's actually try a different way of doing it. So what we could do is run an edge detect on these and make a flood fill. And we're going to do a flood fill to grayscale, and this is just a slightly different way of doing it. So this is going to pick, we're not doing random grayscale, we're doing flood fill to grayscale. So this is going to color the islands in here a different value depending on the texture we plug in. And it's sampling the middle of whatever value is at the middle of this cell is going to become the new value of this cell, right? That's why up here we get much brighter ones because somewhere in the exact middle of this cell, there's this white value. So we can actually use this as an alternate way, perhaps, of isolating the cells we want. So if I make this really small, and I also want to not have a cell out here in the middle of nowhere. So that's very easy. We just scan our shape to make it fully white and then multiply it over this before the flood fill. Like that. And you can see this did a pretty good job of just grabbing that center shape. And we can make a distance here to just close it up. So there's our first shape, right? That's relatively simple. And now we're going to get another flood fill and just expand this circle here until it grabs the other shapes we're interested in. I actually think this should be the first one. And we'll duplicate this again. We don't need any, well, we need this stuff later, so that's fine. We're going to keep expanding this out further. We're trying to get the big long triangles. There we go. So this is sort of an easier way, perhaps, of doing these ones. So there's our red pattern. We need to close these all up. So here's our bigger triangles. And then we already have our biggest ones. So we can actually just recombine these into their colors. Right, so we can get a RGBA merge. Not an alpha merge, but an RGBA merge. And we know in our red channel, we're going to have the small little star. So that's this one. And then in our green channel, we have the bigger triangles. So we just subtract these from this, and we're left with our big triangles. And then in our blue square, or blue channel, we have the whole shape. So just this guy. But we're going to subtract both the main pattern, like the little red pattern, and the bigger triangles. And there's our blue pattern. So this is just a different way of doing this, but I think it just made that a bit easier. And it is worth having that. This may seem minor, but it is clear that these are a different shape than these. There's more of them. The triangles got longer and thinner because there's more of them. This will be more accurate. We can then plug this into a tile generator. Color. We're just going to do the same thing. Set this to 1 by 1. And the reason it's not liking this right now is the alpha. So we could just take an alpha split and just, we don't really need the alpha. So this node is just going to take the RGBA and just give you the alpha separate from the RGB. Because we don't really need both. That works fine. And then we're going to do the same thing. Scale this down. Offset them. See, we're getting some blur as well. There's no difference in the color here, but as we scale this down, it has to apply some filtering. So if we don't want that blurring to happen, you can go up to the image filtering and set it back to nearest. And we had a whole thing on this recently on the channel about artifacts, which I think is worth going over. And we just move these into the corners. And bit of a detour, but I think we're back in a better spot here. It's much closer to the concept. We can just look at one pattern now. We don't really need the duplication. And here, we need to re-merge them in with all of this. It's fairly simple to just blend them over top, really, and just set the blend mode to max. Because max is just letting the brighter of the two values through. And everything here, it is brighter. Red channel's brighter, green channel's brighter, blue channel's brighter than anywhere out here, which is just black. So they just sort on top of each other nicely. Cool. May want to make some adjustments. They look like we probably could use a bit more space between the blue there. It actually looks like these ones taper a little as well. So again, I think it is worth chasing down a bit. So let's actually see if we can make that adjustment. I'm going to just scale these down a little bit. So they're not as thick. Yeah, that looks much better. We have a much deeper triangle there now. That's cool. And we're going to put this shape, and we know it'll be the same red as, or whatever color we do choose, is going to be the same color as this. So he should just get, we'll get an RGBA split to split apart all of the channels, right? And we'll recombine them. But, and I'm just going to plug in a white into our alpha so we can see everything. Everything here is fine, but we're going to sneak this pattern we're making here, the sort of border, into the red channel. So we'll just add this because we know these will all be the same color. And there's our pattern essentially. We probably need to make some adjustments. Like this is too, it's too small, obviously. So we can go here and scale this up. So that's probably a bit better. And it might actually be the case that our pattern in the middle is a little too big. So really easy. Go to our tile generator, scale it down a bit. Give us some more room. So that's what's so nice about doing, like, I would not want to make patterns like this again in Photoshop like I used to, you know, a decade ago or whatever it is. It is really nice and flexible to change this as you come up with new things you want to do. It makes your life way simpler. The last thing we need to do is just make these little cuts. And that's really simple. We can just make the adjustments here. So we'll get another splatter circular, right? It should be kind of, everyone should kind of expect that now, I guess, because we are going to use a lot of them for pattern making. We'll set this to squares this time. And we'll rotate the ring 45 degrees. And we'll just make these really tall. And we'll just add them to make those kind of exit paths. And we're done. Right? Because now that we've added those breaks, when the shape stroker works, it also follows that. And now we should be good. This should be a completed pattern. And the nice thing, like I said, is all we need to do in this graph is make a single output, because this graph's whole job is just making this pattern. And now we'll hop back into the main graph and add him to all of our tiles. So we'll go back to the main graph. We need to decide where we want to put this. So we're just gonna, the graph is getting a little bit heavier, but it's not that bad. I got a fairly strong computer here, so it takes it's pretty short to load it all up. I think we probably want to start by putting it on everything. We may decide we don't want it on everything at the end of the day. Like maybe it's only on certain tiles perhaps. But let's assume we want them on all of it. It may be the case actually that we spread the pattern across multiple tiles too. We have options. So we did all of this cracks and dents stuff with our little white patterns here. Presumably that's part of the stone. So the painted pattern that would go on top of it should be on top of this. But it should definitely be below all of the grunges, because the grunge should be on top of that paint because it's just been sat there. So we'll probably put them in somewhere here. I'm just going to drag our pattern generator out. And what we're going to do, get a flood fill mapper grayscale. And, well, that's our, we want a flood fill mapper color, excuse me. And we need our flood fill bounding box, which we've been using all day. And plug in our color pattern. And there we go. It actually looks really cool where you see the pattern completed. That's sweet. So right now there's a pattern on every tile, which again, we might not want. We might want to actually have it one for every 4 tiles. But let's assume we start here and we'll just see how far this takes us. So on the splatter here, we probably also at this point want to separate these out. So we get an RGBA split and we can lay on our colors one at a time. And we're going to do some other stuff here to make it more interesting, but let's just get it in, right? I'm a big fan of getting stuff on, just like blocked in some way, and then doing all of the adjustments later. It's like what we did with our cracks. Just get them in, see what they look like, and then figure out what you need to do to adjust them and go from there. So I'm going to pick probably similar colors that are on the concept for now. That doesn't mean we'll stay with them. We have lots of flexibility to change them. But let's kind of begin with these and go from there. So it is sort of like a dull red, almost a brown even. Right, so let's pick kind of a really dull red. And we'll put these on like this. So there's our red paint. Now we'll do the next ones. And we probably want to do the red last and the green first, to be honest. We want the big one on first. So this is more of a like dark green. And again, we're going to have lots of time to play with these colors. Let's assume something like this for now. I don't want it to be like super in your face. I'd rather try to, like I said, I'm trying my best to be a bit more subtle with my color choices. Then we'll stack the color that goes on top of them, which is sort of just like more of a beige, right? So it's like a warmer tone. It's pretty low saturation. It's a bit brighter. We probably want it even brighter than that. Yeah, because they're looking a little too like flesh tone right now. So let's make these quite a bit brighter and desaturate them a bit. And then we'll put the red on. It's really nice when this stuff all kind of comes together. Let's try this. It's probably a little too orange. It's like a little too much of a peach tone. So we could probably make this a bit more red. Desaturate it a bit. Darken it up, yeah. I think that's pretty cool. Now, we're going to want to do some, like, the nice thing is all of the grout gets removed anyway, right? We'll want to get rid of it in the cracks as well. The reason why it's not showing up in the grout is because we're making sure to do a smart thing here, which is layer our blends in correctly, right? So because our grout doesn't happen until way down here, it kind of takes care of cutting off those tiles already for us, right? So you want to keep an eye on that. You always want to make sure that you're able to do stuff downstream from where that blend happens, and stuff is just done for you, right? We don't have to work that much because any of the stuff we do behind this will automatically get removed from the missing tiles, right? You don't want to be in a situation where you do this grout and then you're trying to lay the patterns on after this, but mask them out, right? Just do it for free by having it masked out automatically by just proper placement of the order of things. So we're probably going to play with these color picks quite a bit. We definitely need masks to turn them off in the cracks between tiles. That'll be important too. And we also need them obviously to be more interesting than just this kind of like, they're like a perfectly new paint. And there's nothing really interesting going on the colors themselves. And we may change the colors a bit as well. But what I'm going to do first is I want to try, I think it's too frequent. I think each tile having its own pattern here is a little too much. I think this pattern should be on 4 of them instead of 1 of them. And that's really easy to do because our tile started as, I think it's 10 across, or it might be 12. I think it's 10, which does actually make our life a little complicated because it's harder to separate these into groups of 2. But we can, it'll just be 5 by 5. I don't know what I'm thinking. That'll be fine. So if we just make a tile generator down here and we go 5 by 5, we make it a square. We give them all luminance random. We do an edge detect, and we're going to basically just make our own flood fill down here just for the patterns. So they show up twice as big. A really thin edge. You see, this will automatically really change it. What on earth? Oh, I swapped I did the wrong thing. There we go. I kind of like this better. So it's the same pattern, but it's spread across multiple tiles, which I like the look of. It's a little busy, but we have a lot of options here. And I don't think either are bad, really. We can also lower the opacity. We're going to do a lot to lower the opacity of these, and there's adjustments to be made. So we can just hold on that for a sec. Let's add some breakup to these. So we can do stuff like slope blur these, right? And get like a cloud or something to just create some breakup on these right away. Right? We've never slope blurred a color, I don't think, but it works just the same. Maybe we can set this to like min to eat into the shapes. This just makes the lines not so perfect. As we get some edges getting beaten up. We also probably want a distance after this to close up those black gaps there. We forgot to use our distance here. Much better. So you can do a little bit of that to kind of mess with these shapes a bit. Just break them up a little. it might be worth doing it per shape. Because the reason is right now we're getting some, like, it doesn't make a ton of sense for these to be separated from this one, really. So we can change that. Basically what we'll do, we still want that distance. What we'll do is combine where we're blending on the green. Instead, let's blend them all on. So I'm going to get a grayscale conversion here. Histogram scan this. Or at least we'll add all the flower shapes together. So we can go, these are the same elements. That's a little bit trickier to do. Another alternative we have, actually don't mind that. Let's combine all of these. For the dark green. Yeah, and I think if we slope blur just the dark green, everything else will basically come with, because they're all they're much smaller usually. So if we just apply our slope blur to the dark green only, let's give ourselves some more room. We'll get our moisture noise or whatever we want to break this up with. Set this to min. And I'm going to histogram scan it again just to make it a bit more high contrast. Tighten it up a bit. Yeah, so all the shapes get eaten into a little bit. They're not perfect. This might be even a little too intense, but something like that, just to give them a bit of breakup. And now I don't think we really need them on the other ones because they're on the internal side of these shapes anyway. We do want it on the red though. And the red one has the issue that if we modify the red stripe, we're also going to affect the stars. But we can mask those out fairly easily. Right, so here's our red. And I'm just going to get a disk, scale it down a bunch, and just subtract it just to get rid of, oh, I'll need to tile them around. So we could duplicate this guy and make a different grayscale here. So here's our little discs. This seems like a lot, but it's definitely worth it. This gives me my red shape, and I can split the red shape out and subtract that. Right, the whole point of this is just to get rid of this shape in the middle. So we have these, and we're cutting out that shape. Now we just need to get the one over here too. And for that, we just need a disc in the corner as well to get the stars that show up at the corners. And we can just add these together like so. And now we do a good job of cutting out. We're missing a little bit of it, but that's just that this needs to be distanced. It was the same thing as this. We need a distance here. Cool. So now we have just the strip. So now we're able to slope blur. Basically, we want to do the exact same thing we did here. to beat up that ring. And that does a really cool job. So I think the pattern sits a bit better. And then, so just to reiterate, so we can see what we did here. Put these here. Our distance is here. This is all the fancy stuff we're doing to get rid of the dots and be able to just break just the line art up explicitly just on its own. So I think that works. Yeah, this is looking nice. And then we're going to need the red again to do the stars in the middle. So we'll make sure we're using the same color. Like that. And we'll grab the version that has the stars. You know what? We really want the stars separate from this edge completely because we need the stars on their own. And that should be fairly easy too. We just grab the version where they are here and multiply our stars over top. So we've just separated them out. So we have the edges and the stars as separate elements. There we go. So it seems like a lot of work, and I guess it is, but it does go a long way, I think, towards creating that believability. We really want that edge damage. It didn't really make sense to have the edge damage here between the two paint layers because they're all one icon, right? So this is cool. What we're going to do as well is we need to get rid of all of these patterns when they happen to be over a crack. That's also not that tricky to manage. What we'll do is I just want a bit more room here. So move these out of the way. And I might move the whole albedo chain out of the way here as well. Like this. Makes sense. And what I'm going to do is we're going to blend this completely over top of where they weren't. Right? The exact same kind of trick we had been using with the cracks. We apply cracks to the whole thing, and then we decide where we want the patterns. So here's the unpatterned version, and here's the patterned version. And then we just need a mask to blend where we want them. Making this mask seems tricky, but really we do have just all the ingredients all here anyway. So we need this part of the mask. Right, and you'll see if we do this. That's perfect. We know we need this. So we add that as well. And we don't really need to add the stars, I believe, because they're already included in this. Right, if we added these, they're already white there anyway. So this sort of becomes the mask for where we're going to put the patterns on. And why that's nice is we can do stuff to this mask to just turn the pattern off like wherever we want. So for instance, we could histogram scan a moisture noise and subtract it, and we'll turn the pattern off anywhere. Which is a really cool effect. And we can do things like, you know, scale this up so it's a bit more frequent. And maybe we don't completely remove the mask in those parts. It just gets weaker or the paint is like rubbed away. Right? We have a lot of flexibility here. And if we like, we can always swap our flood fills so that instead of using the custom, you know, 5x5 grid, they use the original 10x10 if we like the look of them, each on one tile. Right? We can still change that whenever we want. And in fact, maybe the ones on individual tiles work better. I don't know. It's really up to us to decide like how we want to favor this. And I do think we probably want to change the colors a little bit too. I'm not crazy about the red. Let's try... It's okay, but what if we try like an even darker green maybe? So there's a lot of... Maybe the red is okay, but we just need to pick a slightly different red. It's a little too bright. But there's a lot of ability here to play with these and get that exact look we're going for. But we'll keep this for now. This breakup works pretty well, right? Just making the pattern much less legible in certain areas. And we may even want to lower the contrast of this so we get some more variety. The paint, I would expect the paint to be fairly rubbed off. These are really broken tiles, so it shouldn't be on like so clear. We could also make it a lot more spotty in certain areas. We could take something like a Dirt 3, or probably more importantly, like Dirt 1 even, and histogram scan this just to get a bunch of speckles and subtract that as well. And so we get these spots where paint's like totally chipped off. That could be a nice look too. Like stuff like here. That can look really nice. Yeah. Yeah, things like this is really neat. Or paint is sort of peeled off over time. And that's what's so nice about doing this in one layer, right? Because like I said, anytime I have two things going on, in this case, the pattern and then the stone, I want to just have an area for the pattern. That's all this is. This places the patterns on. Maybe we'll give him a slightly unique color because of the patterns. And we'll call this patterns. Makes sense? And then here we just, all this is doing, right? We have thing A, which is our tiles up until this point. We have thing B, which is our tiles with the pattern on it. And then over here, we're just blending between the two of them, and we can spend all of our efforts working on this blend mask to create all the complicated effects we want. Right? Really important, I think, to think about it in this kind of layered approach. And looking at the reference, there's a lot more breakup on the paint than I thought. Right? Which makes sense. We have too many areas where it's really clean. So we should really do more work to break this up quite a bit. So I'm going to do something like zoom out from the moisture noise a little and histogram scan this. Let's get some real high frequency little splotches. We could even run a high pass here. That might even put the high pass down even lighter. I'm just trying to get really like frequent noise we can use to eat away at the shape. To beat it up even more. Yeah, that's cool. And the more we beat up the pattern, the more like subtle it kind of becomes, right? It really isn't, it doesn't need to be the star of the show. And we could always lower the global opacity of it too if we wanted to. Right? If we don't want it to be on at full opacity, we can tilt it a bit so we see more of the stone beneath it. Which should be nice because we did all this cool work on the albedo back there. Just lowering this a little bit gives us a bit more movement in the actual pattern itself. Right? Some breakup, some detail. And this becomes just, like I said, I'm learning to be better at this, but it becomes sort of this subtle pattern, right? It's like a really old floor. You can barely see those pattern looks anymore. It's a little shiny right now, which is distracting me. But I think this works quite well. And we probably want to mask this even more, if I had to guess, on our pattern here. Like, I still think we need even more. So I'm going to grab something like really frequent, like a black and white spot or something. Let's subtract this. I'm going to put an auto level after this just because we're making it quite dark. That might be a little too heavy-handed. So I'm going to auto level this and try to make it a bit spikier. Yeah. We don't need to subtract that all the way. But this mask is getting a lot more interesting. The way this is blending on feels way better. I may also take a copy of our dirt here and divide it so it's more zoomed out, rotate it, and just blend this over straight. It really beat it up. Yeah, I think this is beginning to feel a bit more realistic. We have a lot more wear and tear on it. The pattern is kind of faded into the background a bit. Like, it's no longer the star of the show, right? Like, before we did this, if we didn't have this, it's really obvious. This helps it become a bit more integrated with the material behind it. Like, it actually belongs. Yeah, I think stuff like this looks really neat. Super cool. We should also remove it from the cracks. So we need some masks to build out that crack removal. So let's just reorganize this a little bit. So you can see what we're doing at each stage. And when, obviously, just like all the other Patreon videos, you can download this graph to look through it and follow along. So we're going to want to have it be nice and organized so people can really see what's going on here. I'm going to pull these up a bit. I think we're at the like 6 hour mark, so this is not a bad amount of work for 6 hours, I think. So this works fine. Let's get some masks of these cracks. So we have a bunch of different ones. And we need masks for all of these. So at some point, these cracks go on. We have a bunch of different cracks too, right? We have the lifted cracks, which are slightly different. So we have a lot of different things to consider here. But it should be really easy because we've organized this in a really nice way. So here's the hairline cracks. So we can take this and this and subtract them, right? So just to get where the cracks are. We can't really use this because it's going to cut it off in places where there aren't cracks. But again, we did a min here and we got these little tiny hairline cracks. Like these guys. If we just do a subtract between this and the texture that came before it, we get the difference between them. So this is where the cracks actually are. So if we create this, here's where all the hairline cracks are. So that's a good mask to have. We also need a mask for these cracks, right? And these got multiplied on. So we should be able to just do the same thing find the difference between the two. Let's see. I did the wrong order. We need to go here and here. Little harder to do with multiply, although we care about it a little less with multiply, because if we did multiply it, then they're just everywhere. So we could just histogram scan these actually. We can just do this and we'll be just as good. Because these ones just got laid right over top. So even just doing a histogram scan of it, we'll catch them all. So this becomes another mask we're going to care about. Then I believe we have one more crack, I believe. The lifted cracks. So this one got multiplied on too, which means we can just feel safe to histogram scan this one. Like that. So there's our 3 kind of crack masks we need that we generated at different parts of the graph. Laying them on, we just need to pay attention to what happened in the crack blending. So all of these cracks, everything that came above here, these ones are on everything. Right? These show up everywhere, essentially. They're kind of on them all. So this first blend, we need to blend between the cracks that showed up here, which are these ones, right here, and the cracks that were here. Like invert this so that they're all the same type. And we used this mask to blend between the two. So there's our first mask. And then we did this, our lifted cracks here. They got blended on based on where this mask was. And there we have our completed crack mask. So really it's just about, and we could create some portal nodes for this if we didn't want to. So we could go crack mask. We called these what? Thin? We called these hairline cracks. So we want to make sure that these are consistently named. This is just to get rid of all this stretching everywhere. Crack masks. And then we called this one just cracked tiles. So we'll call this tiles. And then this last one, crack masks, lifted tiles. And really we're just duplicating what happened in this crack blending node again up here. If we wanted more space, we could do them right here. And we can, because we have these portals now, right? Our hairline mask is these ones. Our cracked tile mask is the top. So this just keeps everything a lot more organized. We did a lot of this in the Christmas light tutorial. Crack mask lifted tiles. So really we were just, it's still nice and clean. Still works really nice. These are the exact same blend mode as this really. But now we have those cracks lined up exactly where they show up in the final height map. And what's cool is that we can send this out to a dot node. And we'll call this crack masks final. And now we can swoop up here, get a dot node, switch it to crack mask final, and multiply this so that we're turning off the paint wherever it crosses a crack boundary. Which this will add a ton. It's a bit of work, but it's really nice to turn them off wherever those cracks happen. Because they should, right? We shouldn't have that red paint go through that crack. It should turn off there. Same thing here, right? This makes a really big difference. It's all these sort of little attentions to detail that really will elevate your stuff over the long run. Maybe the paint shouldn't persist through these cracks. It adds a ton of believability. We can even expand the amount away from the cracks that they are removed. So if we like invert this and do a slope blur and grab some sort of noise, like something really noisy, we're going to use a really insanely low value here. As we break up it even more and then invert it again. But you can see the difference. The paint will flee even more from those cracks. And we could turn up the intensity a bit if we want. So the paint avoids the cracks even more. It gives it more of a berth. Which works really nice. It is making some of the thin ones, I think, just like go away. Because they're like these ones are getting kind of eaten away completely. But I think in general, it does a really good job. Like here, this stuff looks really nice. The last thing I want to do with the patterns, I think, and again, like I don't want to take this a ton further because there's obviously so much more you could do. And it'd drive you nuts. Like if we'd spend about 6 or 7 hours making this material, that's a pretty good day worth of work, really. But there'd be many more hours of just adjusting this and getting it really kind of final and locked in. But what I want to do is go to our pattern here and just add some color breakup to the pattern to begin with. So you can take, this is a fun thing you can do. If I just grab some spotty textures and pack them into the RGB channels of a color texture, it's a cool trick. Right, so I'll rotate this one, move it a bit. And the only reason I'm doing that again is just so I don't have to pay for multiple noises. We just get this sort of colorful breakup texture because we have a different texture in red and then green and in blue, and you get kind of a general breakup. And I can just soft light this over top of our paint, and this is just going to create some breakup. We can ignore the alpha here. So obviously if we did this right on top, it's extreme. But if we tone this down quite a bit, we're just going to break it up ever so slightly. So the colors aren't exactly the same everywhere. We have a bit of like color breakup and textural breakup going. I think that looks really nice. We could even, if we want, move this down a bit. Go here and take a one of them. Or if you wanted to be really careful, you take a grayscale conversion of this, auto level it. We're going to do some luminance breakup as well. So just do like an add sub. And again, on full intensity, this is crazy. But as we peel this back a bunch and we just leave it so you can just sort of feel it, you can see all this fun color variation we got into this paint that would have just come from, you know, just over the years as this has been walked on, and just the colors have sort of just changed with time and worn, and the different pigments and the different paints have oxidized at different rates. And we can tune these. They don't need to be, maybe they're a little too extreme, but it's nice to have those controls. So this is a fun little trick for adding kind of quick color variation to something that you're not, you know, it's not super important, because they do have a predominant color. We could even do this similar technique to the grout, actually, because we haven't done a ton on the grout, and it's probably feeling a little left out. So I'm going to just restructure this a bit. I should probably leave that vertical because they're all in the same layer. And we'll call this our pattern blend mask. And we'll make him the same color as the pattern frame. Pattern blend mask. Because they're kind of related. The other thing I might do is break up the pattern along the edges of the tiles. So what we could do there, I'm just, this is a fun part of Designer when you're just kind of cooking, and these ideas just kind of occur to you, which is really nice. So I'm going to grab our final height map, make that into a normal map. Really high intensity. We're going to grab a curvature smooth. It's a bit of a broader curvature, which I like. And if we take the edges, right, we really have a high threshold there. We could also try subtracting something like this from the pattern to break up the paint along the edges of the tile. So we'll blend that onto the mask as well. We'll see how this looks. That's kind of nice. Right, that right near the edges, it also gets worn away. And we can be more extreme with it. But I think that's a cool look. Do you think like people are going to kick that side, the edges of the tile? Like, it's where there's damage anyway, so the paint, it stands to reason, would be more damaged. And that looks really neat. I may even want to multiply this instead of subtracting, potentially, just so it's not so severe. So I'm going to invert this and actually multiply it instead to get more blur. And maybe the pattern is disappearing a little too much. So we can go and tune this. It really is here that it gets tuned a lot. So I'm going to lower that a little bit. It's just a back and forth, right? You're really just trying to get turned down quite a bit down here too. So we're just tuning this. It's a little too strong. Like that. Cool. Yeah, I think these look great. Nice. So I'm going to go back to the grout and let's get some variety put on him, because he's really boring right now. He's just a flat color. He could definitely use some love here. For one thing, I think the grout itself could probably just use some more tooth, like in the height map. So really easy. We can go back to where our grout mask ends. Right, so this is where our grout height map was left. And let's just add a bunch of grit to this. So I'm going to grab probably like a black and white 2 or 3, something really noisy. So maybe a, like, I don't know, we'll grab a, let me think. probably something small. I mean, you could even go as far as a white noise, but let's just try something like a dirt or black and white spot 2 maybe. And what happens if we just add sub this as is? Just to add some more tooth to the grout. It's a little intense. I don't hate it, to be honest, but it's a little bit kind of all over the place. It does add some nice kind of grit in there, which is nice texture, but it's too consistent, right? There's tricks you can do here. So I'm going to slope blur. This is a classic thing to inflate a noise. We did this a little bit on the height map earlier, I think. It's been a long day. But hopefully this gives you an idea of how much work you can actually get done in like a concentrated session like this. But if I blur this, you can increase the... I'm going to like basically inflate these a little. And this can be a very low value. You can see the difference this makes, right? It's a lot more blobby. You can high pass this too. There's a lot of things you can do here to make this feel a bit sharper. High pass it a little. Auto level it. You can even run a sharpen on it. It's a little too noisy. Histogram scan it a bit. Just to grab the peaks. We would probably just want to add this layer. Really low intensity. Yeah, and I'm actually not crazy about these in general, the more I see them. What we could do instead, I don't think the inflated ones are going to work for what we're trying to do here. But it still stands to the reason that I think the add sub, the amount of grit it's putting on is just too consistent. So what I might do is, first of all, you can use a non-uniform blur here and blur it by just sort of a offset version of itself, right? So just move it around a bit. Blur can be quite low. This will help make it not so consistent everywhere. Like the detail won't be so like overwhelmingly strong all over the place. If we want that to change more frequently, we can high pass this, histogram scan it, just as an effort. Like I want it to be blurry, non-blurry, blurry, non-blurry fairly frequently. So doing something like this will achieve that, right? Where it's either off or on really frequently. So this gives us a lot more variety. Right? It's not the same amount of grit absolutely everywhere. You can see the difference with this off. Like that helps. And we could just play with blending them into each other a bit more. That does add like a lot of nice tooth to that grout. Which in turn, like I know we came down here to say, hey, we need to add some love to it in terms of like color, but sometimes just changing the local shading by adding more normal information can get you more color in a way, right? The AO gets more interesting, the curvature gets more interesting, the normals are different, so you get a bit more just shading differences because the light is working differently, which can help too. So I think that looks pretty nice. And I think what we'll do too, now that we have these bigger pieces of grit on, is transform the black and white spot. We'll zoom out from it even more. And I'm going to get this even finer noise working on it as well. So I'll just add sub this. And that sort of fills in the blurred space with at least some noise. And I think that's a really excellent result. We get really fun interactions like this, which feel great. We may even want to increase the height of the grout, right? So it comes between the tiles a bit more. And if you remember, that's just where we were screening on these kind of borders here. Those are the bars. Although, you know what? I kind of want the bars to be a little raised too. That was like the trowel marks. So I think they can go up a little bit. It's not bad. And then we'll raise the amount in the cracks as well. So turn this up. I just want the grout to kind of pour out between the cracks a little bit more. Yeah, I've decided I like the white grout. I think that was a little high. Again, no magic numbers. I'm just feeling it out. But that feels pretty cool. And now giving the grout a bit of different color. There's not a reason to give it a ton of color variation, really. Because it's getting so much anyway from just its surroundings. And we don't need everything on the texture to be like maximally interesting. Some of it is good for it to just be sort of a background detail. I'm also going to turn down the intensity of our AO just a bit. It's getting a little kind of grimy. This is good. So I'm going to go into the grout here. I think having a curvature of his own is probably important, but we can worry about that in a bit. Let's just break this up a bit. So even grabbing another black and white spots or something, and probably zooming this out. And doing a gradient map here is enough to get some just breakup. So I'm using an add sub again just to get the grout not perfect everywhere. And it's subtle, but it just adds a little bit of color breakup or luminance value breakup. And I really think that's all we need. This is really fun. We get stuff like this happening just because of the way the blends are set up. I think that's really all we want for the grout. I don't think it needs to get super interesting. It's okay to have some stuff just be relatively understated. It's not the end of the world. So we'll call this our grout. And then this was our grunge and our dirt, I believe. But this is our grunge layer. And I think that basically gets us done for the color. Call this grout. Or this is the grime. Like I had mentioned a couple times now, there is a lot more you could add to this, right? You could go forever, really. I wouldn't recommend it. But if you're working on something like this, I think we're up to like 6 or 7 hours. That's not a bad spot to be after that amount of work. Like to go from scratch to this is fairly good, I think. Then there's, like I mentioned, a whole other section of time here, which is going into just adjusting these things, making improvements, tweaking different things. Like at some point we're going to go back and do a pass on video for sure of cleaning up these cracks a little because they're a little too big. They're not tight enough, and like they're a little cracked and we need to smooth them. Like they're not as good as these cracks. So we'll definitely do that. Like these stand out like a sore thumb. So we'll definitely work on those. But I think what we should do next is just get on to roughness. All right, so let's hop to that. We're just going to grab a flat color. We're going to treat the roughness very similarly to the way we did the base color and the height, where we're just working from big to small. And we've done a ton of detailing back here. That's all going to be really useful for getting this roughness kind of up and going and jump starting it. So the first thing I'm going to do is just make something like a cloud. And this is just we want to make sure that our roughness comes in at 16-bit, not 8. So we'll go to this first blend and set our output to 16. And this is just to get some initial breakup on here, right? It's not really indicative of anything. A lot of the stuff you're going to do in the roughness maps, we've talked about this in past videos too. A lot of stuff in the roughness map is going to be kind of generic interest. And then a ton of it, probably more, is going to be coming from explicit things like the paint or the scratches or the cracks or whatever, they're actually like individual correct or real details that are observable on the material. But it's nice, in my opinion, first to just get kind of a generic interest onto that flat roughness value so that we have something to look at. I'm going to use a level here just to spread these out a bit. So it's a bit darker than it is bright. And this just gives the material some areas that are smoother, some areas that are rougher. And it's obviously really intense, but we'll pull that back, right? Just so you can barely feel it. But even that just gives us some initial tooth to look at, right? Just something to, like just something for the light to work with, right? So that it looks a bit more believable even right away. From here, we have a lot of other things we can do. So we can take a blend here. And we're going to grab a bunch of stuff that we've done earlier in the texturing process. So for instance, we have tons of really useful noises we've been using over here. So we can do something like convert this pixel processor to grayscale, auto level it. Right, so this is a really nice noise we have here. And I'm going to send this out to the graph. So I'm going to make an RGBA split, or merge rather, plug this in, and we masked this using this texture. So I'm also going to send this in the next slot. And I'm going to do that again down here. This one we already had in grayscale, which is nice. So I'll put this one out. And this was its mask. And this is helpful because it allows me to pull stuff from elsewhere in the graph in just a bit of a neater way. So you can make a dot here and we'll call this albedo mask 01. And if we hop back to the roughness section we're working on and get a dot and grab our albedo mask 1, we can split this out again with an RGBA split. And we can start to blend these over. So you'll see me using add sub a lot here to just use these noises we've built as variation. Right, so this puts in a lot more of a high frequency noise. We're basically imitating that the different types of mineral we have built up in these stones are behaving slightly differently. Some are a bit smoother than others, some are a bit rougher than others. And it's a little intense, obviously, so we'll pull that back a bunch. And we'll also plug our mask in that we were using in the albedo texture. Right? So if we switch to something like a sphere even, we might have an easier time seeing some of the roughness response. I actually don't mind it on the cube. The cube is closer to the way that this floor texture would ever be looked at, right? Basically flat. So this can give us a bit more of an insight into how the roughness is working. But even at this point, it's really subtle. It's just slight variations in smoothness and roughness across the tile. We could punch up a bit more. Let's put it really high for a sec. As you can see, we're getting these little smooth hits in here. Hopefully the recording is picking that up where we get these little shinier bits. And we're going to do that again. Right, so we had our texture here. And we had our mask we were using. So I'm just going to make a dot here called roughness. And put a dot out near our output for the portal node. There you go. So now we have even more of that breakup. And again, the nice thing is it's coming from the albedo, right? So whatever stuff we're doing down here is also, we know, reflected by color information, which is also really helpful. So we'll probably just keep doing this, harvesting some noises from here. So we don't have this one yet. So again, RGBA merge, grab this, grab the mask that it was used for. And this mask was this was a lot more of an interesting mask where we did the per tile stuff. And then here, This is where we did that, where we broke up the grayscale here, right, to create this kind of blend. So what I'm going to do is get a flood filter random grayscale here, because right now, originally what we had done is done the flood filter position and used it to sample the color to get these kind of bigger sections. In fact, I might put more of it in now that we're here. I like the look of having a bit more of it. But to back that up in the roughness, I can make a flood fill to random grayscale and distance this the same way that the position is being distanced above it. And I'll run this to our roughness texture. And he had an alpha as well. So this can be our albedo mask 02. And so we're just creating this kind of bank of textures here to draw from. Down here, we just had a general noise. We don't really need to, well, we probably want to send specifically that one. I was going to say we could make our own moisture noise down there and send that instead. But I think in this case, because we want to make sure it's always matched up, we'll send this one explicitly. Then down here, what were these? These were our cracks. So we'll send the crack and then the mask we use for the cracks as well, because we don't want them everywhere. And what do we have next? Our little spots. So we'll send them as well. And we'll call this, guessed it, albedo masks 03. And these are all really fun to look at usually. These packed mask textures are really cool. We still have some more to go, but you can see that the process of the roughness map becomes a little bit simpler to think about just because we've done so much legwork already. So we go to albedo mask 3. We split that out. This over here. We get a blend and we just peer through. We didn't do 2 yet. So we'll go to 2. The first one was, again, just a real high frequency noise. I may auto level this a bit. And actually histogram scan it just to make it really noisy. Not so gray. I want it to be more white and black. Something like that. A bit more pronounced. This is a little too middle gray, I think. So we'll push that in. And he had a mask, I believe. So we plug that mask in as well. And that now we're getting some really high frequency variation in the roughness map. And if it's feeling a little shiny, that's okay. We're going to do a bunch of balancing of this later. So I can add this in as well. Lower intensity. But we're getting a lot of really interesting detail. And, you know, some people I'll see, and I'm going to do this when I make the video of the 5 different levels, people often will just take their albedo and convert it to grayscale to make the roughness map. That is not good. Like, we're essentially doing that right now, but we have a lot more control over the individual layers, and we can make decisions one at a time instead of having to just, whatever was dark in the albedo texture becomes smooth in the roughness. Whatever was bright becomes rough. Like, it might not be what we want, right? We want a bit more control. So these looks cool too. I liked these. And we had a mask for them as well. So we're just getting a lot of really interesting roughness breakup on these tiles. And like I said, we're going to do a ton to balance this all out at the end of the day. So we had another one. We have our third albedo mask. So we're going to split that. On alpha split, we want an RGBA split. Like that. And this was just that generic noise. And we were using this noise. Let's go look. I think we just added it in, or we ad subbed it in. He was right here. Yeah. So I think this mask we should just use to brighten up the texture, to make it a bit more rough in this grunge. So I'm going to grab it and scan it a little just so we have a bit more control. And I'm going to screen this on just to brighten these areas up a bit and make them a bit less smooth, a bit less shiny. And so we get these cool kind of interruptions where it's not so smooth all of a sudden. Gets a little bit more rough in these areas. Adds a lot more variety. We don't have such a consistent roughness response across the entire material. Right, so we get these nice little shiny specks here. And not so much on the middle where it was matted out. Right? If we take the matte back, punch it up a little. That's cool. And then here, what do we have next? I think we have the cracks. Yeah, so I think the cracks should probably get brighter. So I'm just going to add these, and we have a mask for the cracks. And if you just add them on full strength, you'll see that the cracks actually get really smooth where we see them, or really rough rather. They're not shiny at all. You could do the reverse. You subtract them, make it, maybe we kind of like the shiny actually. It's a little strong, so we'll turn it down a bunch. But that can look kind of neat. Maybe that white we're seeing is like a bit of a shinier material, a bit smoother. I think the subtract is a little intense here. So I'm actually going to invert this and multiply it instead. I can control this a bit better. Cool. So now we can see these kind of dark cracks in it. We can see the light just skate across them, which is really nice. And again, these are all just starting points. You're really just setting yourself for that phase that I never actually show in the tutorials, which is where I do a pass through and just adjust everything. That's also a personal taste thing. And like I said, no magical numbers. These ones are interesting. A cool trick we can do here is make some of these bright, some of them dark, so we can make some of these little dots smoother and some of them brighter. It's up to you, really. You could also just say, hey, I just want these to be really rough little patches. So wherever we have those speckles, it gets really matted out. And maybe that's actually what I do want to do here. Just make these really matte little specks. So let's see what else we can grab here. This was just when we were blending the cracks on, so we're not really interested in that. But now we're sort of interested here in the paint for sure. We don't really need masks for the different paint layers necessarily. The only thing we really need is this mask, where the paint actually gets blended on. Because this, we may want to make the paint a bit rougher, a bit smoother. So we need an RGBA merge. And then down here, we start getting to the more kind of just grunge stuff. So we know we want the grunge in this mask we built. I'm going to turn this into grayscale and auto level it, just so we're able to use this in the roughness mask as well. And then down here is our grout color variation. So it's really the last thing we need. And we have a perfect amount of channels available for this. I'm just using these RGBA merge nodes. If you wanted to, Albedo masks 05, I think. No, it should be 04. Right, yeah. If you wanted to, you can make your own node that has like as many inputs as you want, as many outputs as you want. So you didn't have to make multiple of these. That's what I do. But I like to do them here so people can just use the stock stuff they have in Designer to begin with and then expand that if they want to. So do this. The first is the paint. We have to decide, does the paint become more shiny? Like, is it smoother? Or is it more rough? Right. I think I probably want to go more smooth. Although, you know what? The paint might just matte out the surface a little, which would sort of make sense. If the stone's kind of got a smoother stone to it, the paint might actually do the reverse. And that's nice, seeing the light roll, and it works differently. It reacts quite differently on the paint. After that, we had this kind of grunge. And I think this should probably have like a matting effect as well. So this will just screen to make everything brighter, but we had a mask for it. So it only goes into certain areas. You can already see like the roughness map is looking quite interesting. And we have a lot of cool variation going on here. And the last thing was the grout. So for the grout, I'm actually going to use a histogram range. And we need our grout mask, which we already have. Dot grout mask. And just put the grout on. And the nice thing about the histogram range is it's going to allow us to control all the properties of the grout in one location. So we can decide the grout probably should be very, very rough. So I'm going to boost the position a lot. So it's very right, very, very rough. And this range allows us to control the contrast, like the variation within that value. So I would expect the grout to be very, very bright. Right, it should be extremely rough because it's really crumbly and filled with little grit and sand and stuff like that. It should be much more rough than the remainder of the tile. And I might actually take our grout texture and multiply that back on a little bit just to get a little bit more detail in. But I think this works nice as a contrast. The grout is always much rougher than the tiles. I might even take a high pass grayscale here and scan it to just get some really fine noise from that same texture, and add those, or subtract them rather. So we have these couple little random areas of smoothness in the grout, but it's mostly quite bright. Right, and again, this is something that just converting the albedo into roughness would never work. Right, we could actually just try it. Let's take a grayscale conversion of this and auto level it. This is nowhere near as good a roughness map. Right, we had no control over it. The paint, we have no choice. It has to become smoother. Right, like people will do this all the time, and it's a real cheap out. It is much better to be able to, you should want to do it, right? You get to make a lot more decisions this way with each of the noises you're using. But I think this is looking really, really nice. The last thing we would probably want to do is blend over our grunge that we're using in the AO here. So we can just grab this AO texture, grab him. We'd also probably make this AO just more interesting while we're here too. In a way we can do that. Move this over here. Is grab this. And grab some kind of noise. Moisture noise makes sense for this kind of grunge. Oops, accidentally docked it. You always press D to dock certain nodes. And I'm going to add sub this. This is just to make the AO a bit more noisy. So our AO is a bit more grunge to it, essentially. Just a bit more interesting. Got a bit of breakup to it. And we can send this off as our AO. And I think we're probably going to increase the radius and depth of the AO a bit. I'm actually going to scale this moisture noise out a bit again as well. There we go. That works nice. We'll go to roughness, grab that AO dot we just built. And again, I think in the AO, depends what you want to do. Like if this grime is supposed to represent, you know, slime or like old water damage, then yeah, multiplying this makes sense. If you want it smoother in that grime. Or if it's not, if it's just more grit, then yeah, just doing something like screening it. You'd have to invert it first. Right, this will just matte out that grunge even more. The other thing we didn't really do to both albedo or roughness is adjust that final curvature. So we might want to do a bit of that first in the albedo, and then come back and circle around to the roughness with it. So the curvature, if you're going to use it, should probably go on. We have our final one over here, but it should probably go on before the dirt. And in fact, let's make it before the grout goes on, because the grout sort of has its own thing. The tiles should probably get curvature of their own. So I'm going to go make a dot. This is just to create like brightened up little edges on the edges of our stone tiles. So we're going to grab our final height, make a normal out of it. This is separate from the thing we're actually displaying at the end of the day, so it's not. The strength is sort of irrelevant. And I'm going to grab a curvature smooth. I'm looking for the convexity. I do with the curvature as well. A trick here you can do is to high pass this. And that gets rid basically of some of these gradients. It makes the tiles more equal. And it becomes really easy to scan this to get the edges of the tile. Try it without the high pass too. We do have to contend with a lot more of the gradient. Maybe we just play with a bit less. And this is just getting us like the very edges of the tile. The first thing you can do with this is just gradient map it, just add it on basically to brighten up the edges of those tiles. Now it's really strong. This is also something I see people do when they're new, is they put this on really, really strong and all their stuff kind of looks like it's like plastic wrapped almost. So we don't really want to do it this way. You would want to turn down the add a ton for sure. But I also think the mask itself needs some adjustments. What I would like to do is break this up a little bit. So we could steal this moisture noise and subtract it. And then histogram scan it again. And now it's a bit more broken up, which is more interesting. I think I'm going to skip the high pass altogether. This is a bit more interesting, right? The breakup is a little bit more broken up, I suppose. Like the difference between this, it's obviously a filter, right? Whereas this has a lot more kind of character to it. You get these really nice kind of broken up chunks right along the edges. And it's still awfully bright. So toning this down a bunch. So it's sort of barely visible, but it does add sort of that nice kind of edge damage quality to the edges of that brick. And I can make this really subtle. It just helps pop them a little bit, add some nice contrast to the edges. I'm basically happy with that. And we can include this in the roughness map if we want as well. We don't have any room in another one. So we could just make, we'll make one more and we'll go, hey, for old time's sake, here is albedo map 5, or albedo masks rather 5. And he should go on before the grunge as well, because the grunge should always cover it up. And maybe it's cool to have this actually be much shinier, because maybe it's when it's been kicked, we've kind of kicked away the dirt that was built up on the edges and revealed kind of smoother rock underneath that's fresh. So we could subtract this actually. And now in those white areas, we should get these like shiny hits of light. You see them right there. I'll turn it down a bit. They get a bit shinier on that new material that's been exposed. As you can see how the roughness map is a real opportunity here to tell a story about what's happened with your material. And I think that's basically it. And like I said, this is really just getting your foot in the door. There is a lot more you can do with this, but I'm just wanting to get a solid kind of foundation here. So we'll call this our roughness. I like to make this one a bit brighter. The colors I'm choosing for the frames is sort of arbitrary. I use the same ones almost every time, but they're just something I've decided on over time. There's no special reason to use those colors. Or you'll never, like I said, you'll never hear me make you pick something for some reason that's mysterious or have some sort of magical number, right? It's all just a feel thing. Practice and feel. Cool. So that's basically it for the material. And I think we're at that point where we have enough of everything in that this is a solid base we could then just riff on and actually build out, you know, some adjustments, things like that. I do really want to go and fix these cracks up a bit first, because these ones just are a little too, they stand out way too much. These big, like this one in particular. So it's our lifted cracks. I think they're just too wide, and they're just not interesting enough. We got to break this up a bit more. So I think the cracks just themselves got too big here. So we'll go to our initial edge detect and turn this down. Like that feels nicer now. We don't have this like big obnoxious crack there. And I think where we're screening them on top is actually just a little too intense. So toning that down, well, you know, it's not that bad actually. It's okay. But that feels a lot less obnoxious. Right, we get these nice kind of like hairline cracks where they lift. We might actually be able to go a little bit higher. 1.1. Make them just a tiny bit bigger. Just kind of finding a happy medium there. It's really in here, they were just getting like really annoying. That's better. And in general, it's quite intense there. But we could also take these cracks and give them a little bit of some breakup. They were looking too perfect. I don't know if we have a noise handy here. Not really. So we'll just take a cloud. And I'm going to slope blur this. We're going to need a really, really small setting here. Maybe just to break these up a bit more. Do this. Like that's too much. So 0.02 we'll try. Something like that feels a bit better. And I still think this screen is going on a little intense. The lift is a little strong. So that was bugging me. I just wanted to make sure that we got that in because it was feeling just a little extreme. There's a lot of places you could go and just make further adjustments. Like I said, you kind of work on this endlessly, but you're sort of seeing, you know, a little bit of me going through and doing those balancing acts. Like maybe this dark green paint could stand to be a bit darker, a bit more obvious. Or if not darker, maybe a bit more saturated. Maybe pull a little bit of the blue out or a little bit of the green out so it's more blue. Right, so you can see there's going to be this huge process of just balancing this. These two, I can barely tell this second color in here. So I think having this be a little bit brighter maybe, and a bit more saturated too, so it stands out a little bit more from the grout. And you'll basically just continuously do this, right? Over and over as you're just working on breaking this up even further. But I hope everyone learned a ton here. I'm glad we got to do a whole bunch of other stuff, right? We got to do some pixel processor stuff, which I thought was cool, some pattern making, which was nice, and a bit of some advanced blending, and a lot of crack techniques that I think are really helpful in all sorts of different materials, not just stone. So I thought this was fun. And like I said, we came in at around 7 hours-ish, 6.5. That's a good day's work, I think, to get a material stood up to this point. And then you might spend, you know, that much time again, right? Or another like 5 hours balancing this around and getting, you know, it's always a lot more time it always takes more time to get that last, you know, bit of work out the door when you're trying to get something polished to 100%. That's where a ton of the work is. It's just bringing it from, you know, 85% to 100%. So it wouldn't be surprising if you spent that much time again, just polishing this to a place you were really happy with. But that's just the way this stuff works, right? I think it is much simpler to get something in the box to talk about, right? Just get something set up first, just start. And then you can always come back and make all the adjustments you want later and try to squeeze that last bit out. So I hope everyone learned a ton. I thought this one was really fun. You know, there was definitely a lot in here. And if you've made it this far, like I said, bless your heart. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next one.